The big Trump hush money trial right now. We are in closing arguments. Prosecution about an hour into their closing arguments. Defense has already gone for their side as well. So we want to get some guidance, some insight as we continue to talk about the biggest story here of the day, a former president in these closing arguments, really historic in nature. So let's bring in a friend of the program, former federal prosecutor Neama Rahmani. Thanks so much for joining us on Live Now as we continue to talk about these closing arguments. And prosecution looks like they could go for another 3 hours or so.
Yeah, I'm smiling, Mike, because I personally think that is way too long. I understand lawyers like to talk, and, obviously the defense went on for about 2.5 hours, but I think 4 hours is how you lose a jury. You don't address all the points in a case like this. I understand that some of the arguments are a little bit convoluted, especially the legal arguments that the false business records were in furtherance of an election fraud or a campaign finance violation. And the defense is really going after Michael Cohen pretty aggressively. But I think you want to hit your points if you're a prosecutor and get out of there. If I were advising the state and Josh Steinglass there, maybe keep it a little bit shorter. Let's get in and out. 4 hours seems way too long, in my opinion.
Yeah, it'll just keep going and going. And what is the sweet spot when we're talking about the art of closing arguments? What is that sweet spot area? Is it 90 minutes? Is there really a number?
Well, it depends on the case, right? Obviously, if you have a lot of co-defendants and you've gone through a lot of witnesses, then, maybe you're going to go longer. But I don't think you need 4 hours in a case like this, because there was so much that was discussed that really has nothing to do with the charges. And let's not forget, we have 2 lawyers on the panel. You would think that those 2 lawyer jurors will be able to cut through some of this noise, because really a lot of the evidence that came in about the affair, the scandal, those sordid details, they really don't have anything to do with the charges in this case. Really, were the business records false? And were they in furtherance of or to cover up another crime? So I would keep it a little bit shorter if I were the state. Mike, maybe 90 minutes, 2 hours, certainly no more than 3 hours. 4.5 hours, which is what the state asked for, seems like a lot, in my opinion.
Yeah, so true. And during the break, it became contentious once again, where the judge began with an instruction to the jury after Trump's defense lawyer ended his closing statement by telling jurors they can't send Trump to prison based on Michael Cohen's words. So it got a little bit heated there after the Trump attorney talking about where the jurors could send Donald Trump to prison. The judge did not like that part.
Oh, and Judge Merchan shouldn't like that. That was a completely inappropriate statement, and Todd Blanche should know better. So I don't know if he was trying to be sneaky or slick, but jurors decide whether someone's guilty or not guilty, guilt or innocent. The sentence is completely up to the judge. And to mention a sentence during closing arguments, especially a prison sentence, is wholly inappropriate. Blanche is a former prosecutor. He should know better. That's objectionable. The judge did give a curative instruction. But again, once that bell has been rung, you can't unring it. So the question really is, even if Trump is convicted, Mike, I don't think he's going to prison. These are Class E felonies under New York law, the lowest felonies under the state law. And there's a real possibility that the jury hangs, or Trump is only convicted of misdemeanors. So even if he's convicted of all 34 felony counts, I don't think Merchan is going to sentence him to prison. Logistically, it would be an absolute nightmare to send him to Rikers Island or someplace else. This is a probation case, in my opinion. Now, if Trump actually goes to trial on any of his other criminal cases, the DC election fraud case, Georgia election fraud case, or classified documents case, prison may be a possibility. The jurors won't know that, but it may be a possibility. But in this case, even though Trump is theoretically looking at a 4-year maximum sentence in prison, I don't think there's any universe where the judge actually sentenced him to prison, which makes this comment by Trump's defense team even more outlandish and inappropriate.
Yeah, that's so well said. And walk our viewers right now, because the jurors are just hours away from getting this case. So when closing arguments wrap up, the instructions will be for the jury. And what happens to those moments where Donald Trump will be waiting to hear the verdict? What happens from that moment to when the jury is really deliberating?
So Judge Merchan, and a lot of judges do this, really gives the jurors a lot of discretion in setting their schedule when it comes to deliberations. Now, they all have to be together. They can't talk about the case unless all 12 are back in that jury deliberation room. But when they're deciding to take breaks or lunch and those types of things, maybe they want to go past 4:30. This is something that the judge mentioned today. They have the right to do so. Now, with respect to the lawyers and Donald Trump, they have to be on call and available to return for any questions, any readback, or a verdict. Now, with respect to the first two, just the lawyers have to be there. Trump doesn't have to be there if the jurors have a question. What will happen is they'll write the question, they'll give it to the clerk or the bailiff. The judge will read it to the lawyers, and they'll decide what the appropriate answer is. With respect to a readback, a testimony, the court reporter will read it back to the jurors, generally speaking. So you have that layer. Then you have these really, like I said, convoluted legal arguments. It's not easy. The prosecution's theory of the case is that they're the false business record, which I think a lot of folks can wrap their head around, right? There was this alleged hush money payment and Cohen was reimbursed. But now they're arguing that this was all part of some big scheme to commit election fraud or a campaign finance violation. That is not an easy legal argument. This argument has really been raised once before. Years ago, John Edwards was prosecuted and that jury hung. Now, obviously, this is a very different case, but I don't think it's going to be easy for the jurors to sort through that. So I'm actually glad we have a couple of lawyers on the panel. Hopefully, they can tune out all the noise and decide the case solely based on the law and facts in this case.
There we go. And that's what everyone is just hoping for at the end of the day. Neama Rahmani, thanks so much for joining us, as always, on Live Now from Fox, as we wait for the jury to get this case. We appreciate it here on Live Now from Fox, as always.
Of course, Mike. Thanks for having me.
You take care.